Hi, I'm Danny and this is my video on writing a personal statement. I've tried to make this video as open and general as possible so it works with a wide variety of subjects, but for anyone that's interested, my subject area that I'm interested in is economics. I've accepted a firm offer of A*AA from Oxford, and that's economics and management, and I've put Leeds University offer AAA, economics and management again, as my insurance. I rejected offers of economics at Warwick and UEA, and rejected an offer of economics and management at Bristol. I've also read a lot of personal statements, so probably in the double digits, and read through them and proofread them and stuff like that. I've actually got quite a lot of my mates' personal statements saved on my computer, which is a bit weird, so I might delete them. When you start your personal statement, if you're anything like me, you'll probably be totally lost. I mean, I've just found my first ever draft of the personal statement, and I spent hundreds of words just writing about how beautiful I thought economics was, which really isn't relevant, so I'm glad I changed all of that. So I scrapped all that and decided I was going to write a CV, all the things that I'd done, that I was proud of, that I was interested in, stuff that I thought could be relevant, even stuff that I thought could be irrelevant. I wrote down everything that I had. I found an old CV and just worked from there, adding newer things that I had. Things that could be relevant are any competitions you've entered or won. You don't necessarily have even had to have won if you're a finalist, even if you haven't been given a certificate or anything. When I first wrote my personal statement, I hadn't heard back from one of the competitions I entered, so I just wrote that I'd entered the competition. I was actually very lucky because I heard back that I'd done quite well the day before I sent my personal statement off, because otherwise that just wouldn't have been in there. I'd have just said I'd entered the competition. They still care because you're showing you've got an interest in that subject. If you've got any jobs that you've done, any volunteer work that you've done, write that on your CV. Even if you think I'm not going to write about this in my personal statement, just write it down, because you never know what you might have. You might have got a few spare words where you can slip anything extra in. So anything where you've demonstrated leadership. So at school, if you've helped direct a play, if you've organised a club, if you've helped out your local scouts or brownies, anything like that. Sports, do you play a sport? Are you any good at it? Have you got a belt in karate? Have you been committed to a sport? Have you sort of developed yourself, your communication skills, your teamwork skills through doing this sport? So if you've got any sports that you've done, definitely write that down and you can expand on that in your personal statement. D&V is something that a lot of people have done, but it's something that's very easy to slip in. I had it in my personal statement, I wrote about it. If you're stuck for things to write down, think, what am I proud of? What have I done in the last few years that I'm really proud of, that I remember doing, that I enjoyed doing, that I think I've got something out of? And just think there's such a wide range of things that you can put down on your CV. Once you've got your pretty CV, save a copy of it and then take a fresh copy, maybe print it out and get a pen and start crossing things off. Remove anything that's repeated. So at our school we have to do the UK Maths Challenge every year, and I got certificates each year, but obviously I don't want to write about the fact that I got a bronze in this year, a silver in that year, gold in that year. I just want to take the best year, so the year I did particularly well, and get rid of all the others. You can say you got certificated every year. Is that even a word, certificated? But there's no point in writing, a year-to-year analysis of how you've done. Again, say that you're in a sports team and you've won a cup year after year, or you play for yourself and you've won a cup year after year. Say you've won it repeatedly, just don't give a sort of breakdown of every single thing you've done unless it's particularly relevant. So get rid of anything that's repeated or seems to be a bit not necessary. So just take your best sort of achievement for each field. An example for this could be D&V. So I'm doing my gold D&V at the moment. I've done all the expedition and stuff, I need to get it signed off, but when I was writing this I was in the middle of the gold D&V, and I'd got my silver D&V and I'd written that on my CV that I got my silver, but there's no point in writing your silver because chances are if you're doing your gold you've got your silver, and even if you haven't got your silver they don't need to know that. Just say you're in the middle of doing your gold, you don't need to write about your past things that you've done. Then you have to get rid of anything that seems particularly weak. If it's not too easy to sort of relate to your chosen subject area, maybe get rid of it. If it's something that's sort of tenuous, it might not be the thing that you're the most proud of, and you've only got a limited number of characters, so you may as well just take your strongest achievements. So I didn't write down about the time that I was a tennis coach for a couple of weeks, which was a total disaster because I couldn't really play tennis anyway. I didn't write about the play I directed at my school. There's lots and lots of things that I didn't write about because they weren't particularly relevant and they weren't easy for me to sort of incorporate. If you've got anything that you can easily put onto your UCAS, there's no point in writing it in your personal statement because it's just going to waste words unless it's something you can massively expand on. So for me, something I got rid of that was on my CV was my speech and drama. I do speech and drama, I've done it for quite a lot of years now. Actually, I've stopped now. But I wrote down on my CV that I was taking my diploma. I'd got a distinction in grade 8, and I decided I needed to cut that out and just stick it on the UCAS form. There was a place to put it, so there was no point in me wasting my precious characters. Step 3 is to show interest. Have you done anything that shows that you're really interested, you're really passionate about your chosen subject area? For economics, it's definitely really easy to write about books that you've read. You can probably do that for history, maybe geography. I don't really know which subjects you can do it for, but if there's lots of books that you can read about your subject and show that you've read around your subject, definitely worth putting them down. You have to then remember later that you don't want to write all of the books that you've read down. I mean, obviously if you're applying for literature, it's nice to write a lot of things down, but for anything where you might have an interview, be careful, because you don't know what they could ask you, and they might ask you about lots and lots of different books, and you don't want to have to do lots of last-minute reading. In my sort of initial draft of my personal statement, I've got 4 books down. For my final draft, I chopped that down to 2 books, which was lucky because I really started interview preparation very late, and I probably wouldn't have had time to read all those books again. As it happened, they didn't really ask me much about my personal statement anyway in my interview. Anything else that you've done? So if you read a newspaper regularly for economics, you could write down about the Financial Times, I guess. I didn't write that down because for some reason I could never be bothered to go out and buy the Financial Times. Podcasts you can listen to. There's some really interesting LSE lectures online. Ooh, I've got a message. LSE lectures online, so I listened to a few of those and wrote down about one of those in my personal statement. I sort of linked it all together. Have you been on any trips? Is there any place you've been to that's really interested you? So for art galleries, if you're going for history of art or something like that, have you been to a historical museum or something that really got you interested in a particular element of history? Obviously for economics, trips is harder to incorporate. And finally, EPQ is definitely something you can write down. I wrote down about my EPQ and my EPQ subject, and there's just a massive range of things you can write about in terms of the EPQ, so you've got some skills from doing it, but it also shows a massive sort of investment almost in this particular subject, because the amount of time and effort that goes into EPQs or any sort of similar qualifications can be massive. Once you've got these lists of all the things you want to include in your personal statement, it's time to start sort of ordering it, putting it together in a nice structure, a sort of big skeleton, as it were. Here's my basic structure. I just went through my personal statement now and wrote out sort of how I ordered my personal statement. I started with a basic overview with the subject, why I want to study it. Then I go into a few achievements, things that I've done that I'm really proud of, that I think show that I'm truly committed to economics. So for these achievements, it's actually essay competitions that I entered and did okay in. Then I linked any other subjects in there, which was maths, because I thought it's definitely important that I show an interest in maths if I want to study economics at uni, because maths and economics are sadly very much interlinked. Work experience is important to include. I shoved a few together in one paragraph because I thought they showed similar skills, so there's no point in writing this work experience developed my communication skills and this work experience developed my communication skills. You may as well put them together. These work experiences developed my communication skills, and you might want to put why they developed them and how that's useful for economics or whatever your chosen subject is. I did a bit at the end about extracurricular, tried to relate it very much to my course, which was quite useful because I'm doing management at university, hopefully, as part of economics and management, and it's quite easy to link a lot of things to management. But anything there that's extracurricular where you can show leadership can be useful for any degree that you're applying for. And volunteering, it's nice to show that you can have a heart on occasion. I think the typical statistics that they look for, statistics, that's not quite the right word, proportion, the typical proportion they look for in personal statements is about 25% dedicated to extracurricular activities, although it's worth noting that some institutions like Oxbridge and some Russell groups don't really care so much about extracurricular, they just want to see your drive and your passion for the subject. But definitely put in a few extracurricular things that you've done to show that you're not entirely focused on work and you can bring something extra with your personality to the campus or city, university, wherever you're applying for. And then end with a wrap up. Make them really want you. Show that you want them and they should want you. People often get quite worried when they've got their structure. How on earth am I going to write this massive chunk of information that's going to have to sell me to all these different universities who have never met me? And it'd be quite an intimidating thing to do. And you don't know where to start, how to write your paragraphs, and you end up writing way too much about something that's actually very, very small. The way I like to do it is to show a sort of progression, so how you got from one place to another, which shows that you're sort of academically curious. You've got this intellectual curiosity. That's quite a nice phrase. intellectual curiosity, so you're jumping from things, you get excited by things, and so you want to find out more, even if the link is slightly tenuous. As long as you can explain it and throw in lots and lots of different points, it's a great way of showing your sort of wide range of sort of interests in the subject. This is an extract from my personal statement. I think it's the third paragraph in it, and if you look at the things in red, that's all the different sort of points that I'm making. So I start out talking about a competition essay that I did. Then I move on to a book that I read, Capitalism and Freedom. For anyone interested in economics, Milton Friedman's quite straightforward to read. Free to Choose is also quite straightforward to read. He wrote that, and it's definitely a good name to have down because he's quite famous, but very, very accessible. Move on to a lecture I listened to there. That's not actually his name. I realised after I'd sent this in that his name is actually Yaron Brock, which was a bit unfortunate, but that's a lecture I listened to. Moved on to an area of interest, behavioural economics, very interesting area, and moved on to another book, and I've got my EPQ there. And it's all starting from one stem, but it shows the wide range of sort of paths I followed from this initial idea. Anyone who loves drawing spider diagrams, tree diagrams, whatever you want to call them, will find that it's really, really good for you to do that before you write your paragraphs, because you can see all the sort of range of ideas you want to incorporate into one initial sort of line, and start with your big powerful thing. So if you've won something or if you've done well in something, put that at the top, capture their attention. So once you've finished your personal statement and you've made sure it's inside the specified sort of limits that you're allowed, I think it's 4,000 characters and a certain number of lines unless it's changed, so definitely check that once you've got your personal statement written out, make sure it fits in. It's very easy to get rid of excess words, or at least at the start. So if you've got for example, off the top of my head is competition that I entered, had a really long name, so I just condensed it down. Instead of the Dorian Fisher Memorial Prize, it was the IEA competition. Much shorter, uses much less spaces, and so it allowed me to fit more and more into my personal statement. Anyway, once you've got your whole personal statement sorted out, proofread it quickly, make sure it's got no spelling mistakes and grammar and stuff, and definitely give it to other people as well. So people at school, your parents, your family, anyone that you can, just give it to them. Say, can you please check this is okay, check that the spelling and the grammar is good. Also, you can ask them, is it clear, does it show why I want to do this subject, does it convey my passion, or does it feel too forced, has it got too many cliches in? I think you often get lots of cliches about burning, and I've got a burning passion, this sets me alight, I feel like I'm on fire. Definitely try to avoid cliches. And then if you've got time, leave your personal statement for a bit, for about a week if you've got a week, or a few days if you've only got a few days. Leave it and then come back to it, and you'll read it again and you'll pick up so many more mistakes and things that you want to change and tweak about that you might not have noticed before. This is something that a lot of authors do as well, and poets. They'll just leave their thing in a drawer for a bit and then come back to it and look at it and see, how would they like to change it, because it's almost as though you're giving it a fresh set of eyes. Something that's really important to remember is that if you've got advice from other people, you don't necessarily have to take it. So there was one sort of incident I had, not really an incident, that sounds a bit exaggerated. I had a situation where someone told me to put a sentence at the start of my personal statement, and someone said I should have it at the end of my personal statement. So you get totally contradicting advice, and it could both be right, but obviously you can't necessarily take all of the advice that you're given, because you might have a sentence that fits in lots of different places, and it's where you feel happiest having it, what seems to work best for you. The final step is just doing lots and lots of proofreading before you send it off. Here's a list of all of my drafts, which looks really excessive. There's actually 13 drafts there. Although towards the end these drafts don't really differ from one another beyond a few sort of grammatical tweaks and a few word changes. They're just getting shorter and shorter as I'm trying to fit into this character limit. Actually it was the line limit that stumped me, because I decided I really wanted to have lines between my paragraphs, so I had quite a lot of cutting I needed to do. I think I had a total of about 3,600 characters in the end. I think you're allowed 4,000, or at least you were when I did it. So it's just that final tweaking that you have to do to make sure that your personal statement is right and it suits sort of who you're aiming it at. Do you think it really conveys the best sort of person that you are? Make sure it conveys everything that you stand for and your true passion and desire to study this subject. Once you've sent it off, you should definitely read it back and look at it in a few months' time, and you'll be so embarrassed by what you wrote. Some of the stuff I wrote I'm just cringing at. But you know what? It's a personal statement. They're all going to look like that, and you've got to sort of show off. Almost really, yes, just show off in general. Make sure you don't look too sort of, woo, check out me, but definitely get their attention. Make yourself look as good as you possibly can. without totally lying, because that's wrong and they probably find you out. Before I wrap this up, I'm going to give one piece of advice to anyone that's watching this, particularly now because I'm posting it in July. Just get writing a personal statement as soon as you can, because I left mine quite late to start writing, and it became quite stressful because I had to go for the early bird deadline, which is anyone that's applying for medicine or Oxbridge, I think, maybe dentistry as well, I'm not really sure. But check out if you have an early bird deadline, that tends to be earlier than the general January deadline. I think for me it was the middle of October. So I had quite a rush to get my personal statement written, and I just wish I'd started it earlier. Same with the EPQ actually. For anyone doing the EPQ, just get it out of the way, because it's total hell leaving it till the last minute when you've got loads of other exams you need to do. But yeah, that's my advice on writing a personal statement and getting it done. Feel free to ignore as much of it as you like. Hope you have a wonderful day, and best of luck with getting it done. Let me know if you've got any questions. Woo!